Today is 21st of September on Tuesday, and we are going to be speaking with Sanjoy Banerjee, who is in New York at present, where the time is around 12 noon and it's 9 a.m. here in Los Angeles. So, Sanjoy, how are you today?
Very well. It's a beautiful day here, as I hope it is in Los Angeles. We are just coming out of COVID here. At least I'm at the university. It's reopening. Classes are restarting. So that's all good news. Thank you.
That's great.
Uh, it's a great pleasure to, say something about North Point, which I, of course, enjoyed very much.
Yeah, and we are so happy that you're with us today and spending the time from your busy schedule to be talking to us. And we've met on several occasions, and I know that you're actually very deeply involved, usually, at least in your mind, if not physical presence, with the North Pointers and your friends. So, thank you again. And I have three short questions to ask of you. And the first one is, can you describe your feelings and emotions during your very first day in North Point, and also that during that week? How did those compare with your expectations as a young kid?
So, as as you might know, I have a sort of a curious story here. I first came to North Point. Actually, my mother brought me because she was quite friendly with Father Stanford, who was the rector at that time. Uh, when I was 7 years old, and this was in 1951, and I came in, and it was a revelation, of course, because we had this huge rooms and dormitories and things like that. And I actually spent about a week, and my recollection at that time is that there were lots of little boys around, and I was trying to get to know them. My mother was staying in Darjeeling at that time, so I would see her occasionally. But then what happened was she felt for some reason that primary division was not where she wanted me to be. So she took me out of North Point and took me to what was essentially a prep school for North Point, or the Darjeeling schools was Clifton Hall. I don't know if any of my colleagues remember this, but it was a school in which several North Pointers went there. And in fact, somebody who was a bit older than me, senior to me, was there when I went, Clint Culpepper, who was a very good hockey player, I remember. In any case, I spent 2 years in Clifton Hall and a couple of years in Calcutta after that, and came back to North Point just in the lower division. I was in fifth standard then. So it was sort of a not known quantity to me, and things, of course, were relatively easier since I'd been in Darjeeling for a while, and I had some acquaintance with North Point. So my recollections are rather vague, but always somewhat pleasant, I must say, about that time. LD was very different from the primary division. You probably joined in the primary division, I don't know, sure, but it was different. You know, things were the people were much more grown up, and I remember there were already people who were boys who were excellent athletes. I remember New Win particularly at that time, who was a fast bowler, and we used to play in that little field up there, which was a recollection I have very well. This was not the upper division field, but the little field, the lower division field at the back. So that is a recollection I particularly have of going around that field, and games going on and things like that time.
Who were some of your friends during that time?
You know, in the lower division, I was actually quite friendly with New Win. who that's why his name came up. And then I became actually I was quite friendly with a lot of the Burmese boys. You know, there was Tom Bau, who was I think a year senior to me, and then there was Mong Mong. You know, I don't know if you guys are still in touch, but for quite a while I was relatively friendly with the Burmese boys. And then uh, actually, I also met uh, Benji at that time, became quite friendly with him. He was called Yapper at that time. But nonetheless, he had the gift of the gab, and he was a wonderful guy. And we remained friends all through. In fact, I remained friendly with almost all of the people I met in LD through my time in North Point. And I also was very friendly with Yapsila Wang, who was in my class. Uh, we graduated together. And TK Leong at that time, his older brother was TC Leong, a very, very good footballer, I remember. So we had a group of people who sort of stayed together through the years. And it was interesting because this class of ours was quite a distinguished class. It sort of was not only good in sports, but unusually also very academically talented. Yapsi, of course, was extremely talented academically, as were several of the others. You know, so it was an unusual class that we were in.
Yeah, some of the names that you mentioned, in fact, I've heard of TC Leong as well as Mong Mong. And surprisingly, also, I had met Niwin in our Burmese reunion, I think 2014 or 2013, something like, or 2012. And
Right.
and also Tom Bau also I met during those reunions. Of course, we didn't know them in school, but these names that you're giving me are so familiar. And so that kind of leads me to the second question, which is what was your absolute best moment or best day during your entire time in school? And could you also please describe a couple of lasting imprints North Point left on you that you think about till today?
Well, that's a very interesting question. Uh, you know, there are unusual times in North Point, and it's hard to know what was the very best day. Uh, One of the days that sticks in my mind is when we were writing the Cambridge exams, actually, which was when North Point was relatively empty. You know, everybody had left, and it was very peaceful, very quiet. Just the group of us were there, and it was like an epiphany, you know, to have the peace of the buildings, and of course the fathers were there and so on. And I remember one evening, it was fairly cold, but it was a very, very nice evening, and we were coming towards the end of the exams. You know, so that was a great, of course, relief and happiness. So, in some way, when I think of North Point, it brings to me always a feeling of peace, which I don't know if others would have that feeling. But to me, that is the lasting sort of impression that it was a time in my life, at least towards the end when I was graduating from there, when things were all in order, you know, everything was peaceful, orderly, and then, of course, chaos breaks loose later when you encounter real life. But it was good preparation for life that way because it gave you a solid grounding in yourself. Uh, and that's what I remember most about it. The other thing, perhaps, to talk about, which I remember, again unusually, because you don't think of North Point that way, is that when I was a student, and it started with seventh standard really, the fathers largely let me do in my studies or whatever I really wanted to do, which is very unusual in a school because you're usually channeled to do this, do that, whatever it is, And I loved geometry, I remember. And the book we studied geometry from was, I still remember the book. It's called Sniddens and Snell, I think, or Siddons and Snell. And I was so interested in geometry that, neglecting everything else, I solved all the problems in geometry. And I thought I'd really get into trouble doing this. But the the Jesuits were really wonderful that way. They let you do almost whatever you wanted. So this is a pretty interesting way to educate people that they have, which was to let them develop their strengths. And part of the reason my mother wanted me to go North Point was really because she believed the Jesuits gave you a real education. And because a lot of our family actually went to St. Paul's. So, so this was also somewhat different, some of my uncles and so on had gone to St. Paul's. So I was sort of the first to go to North Point. And then you probably know Munishi and so on. These people went on to North Point. His mother came to my mother and said, I have a completely incorrigible son. What should I do? So she said, send him to North Point. It turned out very well, but anyway. So.
That was nice. At least you broke the mold and not go to St. Paul's and instead come to North Point, and we all benefited from that, and so did you. And yeah, you're rightfully so. The Jesuit way of education, I mean, it stays with us. And you mentioned earlier on about how organized they were, and we developed our discipline and our timings, and getting up early in the morning and making our beds, all from them.
Yeah, I think what they taught all of us is self-discipline, and that has stayed with us. I'm glad you mentioned that. I'd sort of almost forgotten it. Throughout our lives, don't take the easy path out. Do what has to be done, and do it in time, and get it done. So yes, that's served extremely well throughout our lives. Anyway, all of us, I think, really.
Yeah, it's good reaching back into our formative years. When we are young, we haven't kind of formed our firm opinions at that time, and then we get this good Jesuit education, the discipline, and the all-round education in sports, activities, drama, theater, which I don't think we would have gotten if we hadn't gone to a Jesuit boarding school. I don't know, I might be wrong, but I mean, I certainly profess the kind of education they had given people like you and me and others who followed.
Yeah, it was also, hard but fun in some ways. So you learned. The other interesting aspect of this, I must say, is, there's a concern that they would try to convert you and do this and do that. I never faced any attempt to convert me to anything. Of course, probably I was unconvertible. So, but even though, I could see good friends of mine like Albion Banerjee, at that time he became Albion G later on, they were Catholics, and they would go off to chapel or whatever, where we went to study. But there was no attempt to convert us, at least in the years that I was there. So they gave you this wonderful education, and that was it. You got this advantages of that without any pressures religiously or whatever. So.
Absolutely. And you're not the first one who making this comment. In fact, never happened to me either. But then many others who I've talked to have said the same thing over and over again, and I'm so happy that this fortifies the objectives of the Jesuits: teach, 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 and educate. So that was something that you and me have taken back over all these years. And talking about the teaching abilities leads me to my third question, which is. While you were there in school, which teachers can you ascribe your strengths in the subjects you were taught in school, and what qualities did they possess that made you want to learn from them?
It's a very, very interesting question. As it happens, the two teachers that I really learned a lot from were not Jesuits. One was Maurice Banerjee, who many of you may recall, was our science and math teacher. He was absolutely wonderful, at least as far as I was concerned. I learned an enormous amount from him, and he really excited my interest in science, mathematics, and so on. And later on in life, I went on to study engineering and become a professor and so on. So a lot of that comes from Morris, I would say. And he was truly a caring person and wonderful. I mean, I have nothing to say other than that. The second person was actually somebody who taught us health sciences. It was P.K. Matthews. He was actually, you may or may not remember, I don't know how many of you had contact. He used to teach in the college a lot, but he taught at least our class in the last 2 years and really got me very excited about health sciences, biological sciences, things that I didn't do. My father, of course, wanted me to become a doctor like my grandfather or great-grandfather or something, which I didn't. I became an engineer, much to his dismay. But, but whatever it is, Mr. Matthews really got me very interested. So there was a potential direction I could have taken into medicine and biology. And so he was the other one. A third one I should mention really was Father West, Frank West, who was our teacher in the last 2 years. And so in those days, we would alternate. Father Bouvet took the other class for 2 years, and Father West took our class, as it happened. So the preceding year was Father Bouvet, and then the next year would be Father Bouvet, and so on. So Frankie West, as he was known, was a very, very good person. His kindness and everything shone through him. And he was, I think, also a person like Maurice Banerjee, who was very caring and would, work with you. And he taught us the subjects like history and so on, and also very unique in that way. And I should also mention Father Loha. He was my 7th standard teacher, and I don't know if you knew him, Ashok, but he was very funny in many ways. He could make you laugh. It's absolutely charming, and as a teacher. And really, it was in 7th standard that I got interested in academics in some way. And he really helped me to flower, Father Boha. So I've given you 4, not 2.
Now that's good, because the
Really
two, yeah, the two you gave me, Father Loa and Maurice Banerjee, were with us too, and they taught me as well. So I remember them very fondly, and I've heard so much about Frank West, that's for sure. And
Yeah.
P.K. Matthews, I don't recollect, but
Probably he was taught for I don't know how many years he taught for, but he was involved with the college a lot. Right.
I see.
So I think that's sort of my roster of things. And North Point was a unique experience in many ways because I had the good fortune to be with friends and people who were really unique. And one more I should mention, who I became very friendly over the years with, was Ollie Pleshek. He, unfortunately, after we graduated, I think he moved to Australia very soon after that. I mean, his father was in Batas, and he was, of course, Czech, Pleshek. And they went on. So it was only many, many years later that we got in touch. He actually got in touch with me. God knows how he discovered me. He was in Australia, and he persuaded me to come to this North Point reunion that we held in Bangkok and Chiang Mai. Then we went on to, and I saw him then after many years. But we were very close as well during the time I was in North Point. He was also an excellent student and a very good athlete, so a real all-rounder. And he came to this reunion in Bangkok with his son, actually, And then we met again, the reunion that we had in Darjeeling. If you recall, we met up in Calcutta, all of us. And Benji actually drove down from Bhutan when we flew up, picked me up and took me to Darjeeling. I remember. So he turned out to be a great friend as well.
The bonds we build, and
yeah, it's amazing.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
The only thing I really regret is that some of the closest people from North Point, the closest at least to me, are passing on recently. Albion Banerjee, Jimmy Pike. These are real tragedies. They're relatively young, and of course Yapsi Lawang passed when he was very young, relatively young. He went on to King's College at Cambridge after that, and so, but he also was very untimely in his passing. Anyway, so that's the story.
Yeah, that's good. It was very nice that you're giving us all this history, and I know time is too short for us to be recalling all of that, but it's good that we do recall once in a while when we are alone by ourselves all these moments, as I do every single day, and I'm sure you do quite often enough. So, in closing, Sanjoy, any last minute real life advice to anybody?
It's very hard to give advice, especially when you have all sorts of advice that you need to take from others. The only thing I can say is that for those who are fortunate enough to go to North Point, and the students who are there currently, that it's a wonderful opportunity. The complexion of North Point has changed somewhat. In my time, of course, it was almost entirely a boarding school with a relatively small day scholar. But now that ratio has changed. Nonetheless, I think the quality of the education and the part of it that is given by the Jesuits and the people who are still there teaching is going to be extremely high. So people should, the students have an incredible opportunity to avail of this. And part of it is it will prepare them for later life very well if they really, take to heart. One of the most important aspects there was the thing that you alluded to, the self-discipline that you learn to be able to, cope with a lot of the issues that will arise later in life. It's sort of unique. And of course, there's always the team spirit that you get. That will serve well. Anyway, those are my...
Excellent. Excellent.
There, and let's have some more reunions when the COVID crisis passes.
And that'll be for sure. That'll be for sure. We'll all be in touch with each other. So thank you again very much for your time. And I wish you well during these times, as well as good health and safe. Be safe all the time.
You too. Thanks, Ashok. Take care.